This episode of Hitch to Homicide deals with the subject of rape and murder of minor children. Listener discretion is advised.
From 1969 to 1975, one man known for his small stature and penchant for murder claims to have killed between 80 and 90 people along the Carolina coast. Did he do it? Possibly. Much of what this killer told people about his life was fiction. Or was it? What we do know is that he murdered at least 14, 8 of which were found buried in his personal graveyard. When he was finally apprehended and placed on death row, the killing didn't stop, and the man known to some as the redneck Charles Manson only stopped taking lives when he drew his last breath. This is the incredibly true story of Donald Henry Gaskins, better known as the Killer Pee-wee. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Pottorff. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends over there, and I wish we were there right now, in Hawaii.
Yes, aloha.
It's a little bit different today.
Okay.
This is komamai, komamai, komamai.
Very nice.
And what that means is when they say that, it's welcome to our land. So I'm saying that to our Hawaiian friends to welcome to our land.
Welcome to our podcast.
There you go. Perfect.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to like, rate, and review. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it at this very moment.
Yep.
And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. You can find us on Instagram at Hitch to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want true crime every single day of the week, 24/7, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Just go to Facebook and type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a few questions. You're in. Go join.
Yep. And remember, that's the number 2.
H2H.
We'll just keep emphasizing
We'll keep emphasizing that.
Yep.
It's a really good group of people.
Yeah,
lots
fun.
of true crime loving folks.
Yep.
And I also post lots of extra photos and other information in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
We are getting case suggestions and true crime listener stories. Keep them coming. We appreciate everybody who listens each week and takes time to drop us a note,
Yes.
including Caroline Helms and Sheena Yoder, who both suggested this very case.
Oh, really?
So thank you to both Caroline and Sheena.
Thank you.
Or Carolyn. Sorry. Carolyn
Okay.
Helms. I messed you up, Carolyn.
Yeah, we have
Now
one.
I'm going to say your name another time. Miss Carolyn Helms. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you, Carolyn.
There's a lot to this case. I've still got a little bit of the creeping crud going on in my voice, so hang in there with me. But I do want to dive right in. Before we get started, let me thank some sources: Wikipedia, Medium.com, the University of South Carolina, Johnsonville, South Carolina History, Murderpedia, Investigation Discovery, thestate.com, crimemuseum.org, and the Big Book of Serial Killers.
Oh, yeah, my favorite.
There is a book out there, several in fact, but this one is co-authored by our killer. It's called The Final Truth, the autobiography of a serial killer by Donald H. Gaskins and Wilton Earl. I didn't read all of it, but most of it is in Pee-wee's own voice and terrible English. Just going to tell it to you now.
Yeah.
As I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, he really did drop out of school at 8 years old.
Oh, man.
But I will have a link to it and all the other sources in the show notes.
Well, you ready to do this?
I am.
Well, then let's do it.
We're going to start today's podcast with Pee-wee's mom. His mother, Molly, was a poor girl who quit school at the age of 12 to help her family pick cotton and plant tobacco. She had sex with a man named Henry McLaurin Gaskins, a wealthy, well-known neighbor of Molly who loved to gamble and drink. He paid Molly $1 for sex several times a week. She got pregnant at 14, and he paid her $10 a month and allowed her to live in a small 3-bedroom shack with their child. His name was Donald Henry Gaskins, born on March 13th, 1933. He only weighed 4 pounds. He's going to be small for the rest of his life. He was given the name Pee-wee pretty early on, and it stuck with him for the rest of his life.
Wow.
Throughout Pee-wee's childhood in South Carolina, his mom, Molly, and his father, Henry Gaskins, would have sex in front of Pee-wee. They would often laugh at him when they were having sex and push him away when he tried to make them stop.
Wow.
His mom, Molly, had many lovers and also had sex with several men for money throughout Pee-wee's childhood. Many of the men involved in Molly's life were alcoholics and would often abuse and sexually assault Pee-wee while his mother watched.
Wow.
Pee-wee was also teased and made fun of in school by the other kids because he was so little and also because he had bruises. These were courtesy of his mom and the many men that she entertained. Pee-wee's teachers always blamed Pee-wee for his problems with the other kids, and he would often receive beatings from the teachers for not getting along with the other children in his class.
Wow, so he was getting it at home and at school.
Couldn't get away from it.
Jeez.
Eventually, Pee-wee hated going to school, so he would hide out in the woods all day instead of going into the classroom until he finally quit school at the age of 8.
Wow.
In 1943, Pee-wee's mother married a man named Hanna, a field hand, who also mistreated Pee-wee, much like Molly's past lovers. After marrying Hanna, Molly had 2 sons and 2 daughters. These are going to be Pee-wee's half-brothers and sisters. But Pee-wee, even though he's being knocked around a lot, teased and abused, he really had a knack for how things were put together and how they came apart. And at the age of 12, Pee-wee started working at a garage helping to fix cars. He was really known around town for his ability to fix things like toys and fans and toasters, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And despite the fact that Pee-wee was a successful mechanic and good at making money this way, his stepfather made Pee-wee quit work at the garage so he could work in the fields. On Saturdays, Pee-wee would sneak away to work on cars and still make extra money on the side. Now, by this time, Pee-wee had a couple of buddies, Danny Smith and Henry Marsh. They called themselves the Trouble Trio. Now, Danny's father's a bit of a criminal himself, and when Pee-wee is 13, he finds a small shack in the woods, which he and his buddies named the Hideout.
Yeah, that sounds like a young boys group kind of thing. When I remember, because I grew up out in the country, and there was just like 4 of us guys that hung out, and we would always build a clubhouse either out of wood or in the barn, or even when they cut trees down on the side of the road, we'd take the logs and make a little clubhouse out of it.
I can guarantee you the things you did in your clubhouse are not the same things that are going to take place in this clubhouse.
Okay, I'll take your word for that.
Pee-wee, Danny, and Henry would steal candy and cigarettes from vending machines and then sneak back to the hideout and talk about girls, and according to Pee-wee, to basically experiment sexually with each other.
Oh.
Told ya.
Yeah, no. We talked about girls. That was about it.
That same year, the Trouble Trio got in trouble at church for peeping in on the girls in the women's outhouse. They apparently dug a trench behind the outhouse. Can't think of a worse place to be.
Yeah.
And then hid inside there. They were given beatings from their parents, but after it was all said and done, Pee-wee said he wasn't sad for what they did. He was just sad because they got caught.
Yeah, I'm sure.
At 15, with the help of Danny's father, the trouble trio began breaking into homes throughout the area, and they would sell whatever they stole. And with their earnings, the boys were able to buy their own car, and they would drive to Fort Jackson or Columbia, South Carolina, to be with sex workers.
Wow.
And that's how Pee-wee lost his virginity, with a sex worker. Or with one of the trouble trio, based on what I read in his book. So who knows?
Yeah.
But they were bored with sex workers. And the boys wanted to know what it was like to have sex with a virgin. They're 15, by the way.
Wow.
To fulfill their fantasy or curiosity, they lured Henry's 13-year-old sister Julie to the clubhouse, where all three boys raped and sodomized her multiple times. They cleaned Julie up and sent her home, telling her not to tell anyone, but she immediately told her mother what the boys did to her. Julie's mother informed the other parents, and Pee-wee and Henry were beaten within an inch of their lives.
I'm sure.
But Danny's father wouldn't allow Henry's parents to touch his son, and he didn't touch him either. I read something about a shotgun in Danny's dad's lap while he was sitting on the porch waiting for Henry's parents to show up.
Wow.
Soon after the rape, Henry and Danny's families moved away, and the group was split up. This experience was Pee-wee's first at violent sex, and he described it as being a very fulfilling part of his life.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
In 1948, Pee-wee met another partner named Walt at a car shop, and they soon created a plan to break into homes and sell the stolen goods for profit. And during one of Pee-wee and Walt's heists, they broke into a house that wasn't empty, and a 16-year-old girl that Pee-wee actually knew was home, and she attacked Pee-wee with a hatchet when she realized the two men were robbing her family.
Wow.
Now, Pee-wee was able to get the hatchet away from the girl, and he hit her hard in the head, causing her to become unconscious.
Ouch.
Walt was able to get away from the robbery untouched, but Pee-wee was charged with assault with a deadly weapon and intent to kill. She wasn't dead. She was just unconscious. So she knew who it was.
I'm not dead yet.
Exactly. And during Pee-wee's trial, it was the first time he found out that his name was Donald Henry Gaskins.
You never knew before that?
And not Pee-wee.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gee whiz.
Pee-wee was found guilty and was sent to the South Carolina Industrial School for Boys in Florence, South Carolina.
Okay.
Pee-wee went to reform school in 1950. The first night he spent at the reform school, he was approached by a kid named Boss Boy. He was one of the main leaders at the school, and he informed Pee-wee that he would now be his, quote, sweetheart.
Whoa.
And was told to go to his bed each night or else, to Boss Boy's bed every night.
Man.
Or else.
It's like prison.
And when Pee-wee did not obey the following night, Boss Boy and about 20 of his followers raped and sodomized Pee-wee many times.
Jeez.
During Pee-wee's first year at the reform school, Pee-wee was Boss Boy's sweetheart, and he raped Pee-wee every single night.
Jeez.
He would also sell Pee-wee for sex so that he could get some cigarettes. After almost a year of sexual and emotional abuse at the reform school, Pee-wee and 4 other boys who were also raped by Boss Boy ran away from the school. The next day, the police picked up the boys while they were hiding out in the woods. When the officers weren't looking, Pee-wee managed to run away again. He ran straight to his old hideout. He was found there 2 days later and was given lashes for 30 days.
Oh, man.
And 3 months of hard labor, along with 3 months of solitary confinement as a punishment for running away.
Wow.
Now, Pee-wee hated solitary confinement. While he's there, he can't be beaten or raped by the boss boy or the other boys, but he liked being social. Each day, the guards would have reasons to give Pee-wee additional lashes. One day, after being punished for no reason by a guard, Pee-wee punched the guard in the face and then again in the testicles. Got him right in the cookies.
Right in the cookies.
Pee-wee was then sent to the state hospital for mental evaluation.
Okay.
Now, he's only there for 1 day when his appendix ruptured and he was sent to a hospital.
Does this guy have any kind of luck at all?
This guy has an extraordinary life. Just hang on.
Wow.
After he recovers, Pee-wee is sent back to the reform school and given light duty for 3 months. Immediately after light duty has ended, the guards and boss boy beat and raped Pee-wee again every single night.
Man.
Once they even forced him to run around in girls' underwear. In 1949, Pee-wee could not handle the abuse anymore, and he decided to run away from the reform school again, but this time with only one boy. After escaping, he joined a traveling carnival and married a 13-year-old girl named Mary that he met while working for the circus.
What's so funny about that when you said he ran away? The first thing that entered into my mind before you even said anything, he ran away with the circus.
And joined the circus.
Oh, my God.
So when your mom and dad, when you were growing up, were like,
Yeah.
don't you run away and join the circus. Well, Pee-wee did.
Gee whiz.
Yeah.
This is like a movie script.
Then Pee-wee went to his aunt's house, and she agreed to let him stay as long as he stayed out of trouble and helped around the house. It was the first time Pee-wee felt like he had a mother figure in his life.
Okay.
After 3 months, Pee-wee's aunt convinced him to turn himself in and to finish his sentence at the reform school so he wouldn't have to live a life on the run. And I also read he didn't want his new bride to have to lead a life on the run either.
Right.
He turned himself in on January 22nd, 1951. He is now 18 years old.
Okay.
When Pee-wee gets out of reform school, Mary and Pee-wee lived with Mary's family, and he got a job at a construction site. He did what's called shade tree repair, meaning he worked on cars in his driveway.
Oh, wow.
And he did this on the weekends.
Good for him.
Mary becomes pregnant, and they moved to Georgetown, South Carolina, so they could live with family of Mary's. And while they're there, Pee-wee got a government contract job to log cypress trees in the swamps.
Oh, wow.
They lived there for a few months until Slick, one of Pee-wee's friends from reform school, offered Pee-wee a job working on his tobacco farm.
Okay.
It's not actually his tobacco farm. It's a tobacco farm he manages.
Okay. My grandpa had a tobacco farm.
Well, we know a lot about tobacco here in the state of Kentucky.
Yep.
The job came with a 3-bedroom house and a pickup truck in Johnsonville, South Carolina. So he's got a baby and a wife.
Yeah.
That's a good deal.
Yeah.
But apparently it wasn't enough for Pee-wee because Slick and Pee-wee started an insurance fraud racket on the side. He's burning down tobacco farms for large sums of money, for the
Wow.
insurance money.
Jeez.
Pee-wee and Mary's daughter was born on April 17th, 1952. Then Slick got arrested for arson, but he didn't turn in Pee-wee. But because Slick is arrested, somebody else is now in charge of the tobacco fields.
Okay.
And this guy did allow Pee-wee and Mary to stay on and work on the farm. But the new owner that took over, his daughter harassed Pee-wee and said that she knew he was involved in all the tobacco barn burnings and that she was going to turn him in.
Wow. Probably a bad move on her behalf. Yeah.
She doesn't know it, but it is a bad move.
Yeah, I can see this coming.
Because Pee-wee thinks, I got to shut her up.
Yeah.
So while these two are arguing, he panics and he hits her in the head with a hammer. But he doesn't kill her, and she goes to the police. So he takes off so he wouldn't get arrested.
Right.
But he's picked up a few days later and was charged with assault with a deadly weapon with intent to inflict bodily harm and or arson for setting the barns on fire.
Wow. That's a big list.
He was sentenced to 5 years in the South Carolina State Penitentiary in Columbia for the charges. So this time he's not going to reform school.
Yeah.
He's going to big boy prison.
Yeah, he's an adult now.
Now, while he's in the courtroom for these assault and arson charges, he calls the judge a son of a bitch. And folks, that'll get you an extra year in the pokey.
Yeah, he's not helping himself out any.
After the first couple of weeks in prison, Pee-wee became an older inmate's boy toy.
Oh, man.
This guy was considered a power man by the other inmates. Pee-wee was beaten and raped by this power man for 6 months.
Jeez.
So Pee-wee decided it had to stop, and the only way to do this was to prove to the other inmates that he was not powerless. Pee-wee came up with a plan to kill a man named Hazel Brazil, the most powerful man in the prison. He actually slit Hazel's throat while he was sitting on the toilet.
Oh, man.
And then he pled self-defense. And the courts bought it. He was sentenced to manslaughter, but it only got him 6 months in solitary confinement.
Wow.
When he was released, he was known and considered a power man by the other inmates and was given his own inmate to beat and rape.
Jeez.
But Pee-wee always said that he went easy on that boy.
Yeah.
In 1955, Mary files for divorce. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Why, Mary? Why did you file for divorce?
Such a wonderful life you created.
But Pee-wee went nuts when he found this out, and he escaped prison in garbage barrels to try to save his marriage with Mary. And after he escapes, he shows up at the Peppermint gas station owned by his cousin, David Gaskin, steals his blue 1950 Pontiac because the keys were in the ignition, and went to visit old carnival friends who lived in Lake Wales, then went out on the road with the carnival.
Once again, you're making all this up.
I am not, and it sounds a little Shawshank, if you ask me, because he's getting out in trash barrels.
Yeah. Wow.
Because at some point, this became not an escape to keep Mary from divorcing him, but I'm escaping so I can be free. Because he gets married while he is still married to Mary, a 19-year-old girl named Junie Alice Holden.
Wow.
He ended up driving Junie back to Lake Wales so that he could rejoin the carnival in Valdosta, Georgia, and never heard from Junie again. And their so-called marriage lasted a whole 2 weeks.
Gee whiz.
Now, while he's working the carnival, he meets yet another girl at the girly show named Zena from Zanzibar. Real name was Betty Jean Gates.
So Zena from Zanzibar wasn't her real name?
Nope.
Oh, my gosh.
These two head to Tennessee to bail out her brother. She found out he was wanted in 5 states for felony charges. When they get there, he found out they weren't bailing out her brother, but her husband, who wasn't getting out on bail at all, but escaping.
Oh, my God.
The plan is for Pee-wee to go see Betty's brother in jail, a.k.a. her husband, and take him a carton of cigarettes, and inside was a razor.
Okay.
When he's out, Betty and her husband steal the car, and now Pee-wee is stranded in Tennessee.
Wow. I'm surprised they didn't, take him a cake with a file in it.
Nope, just a box of cigarettes with a razor.
Wow.
The next morning, police came to the hotel. Pee-wee lies and says his name is David Gaskin, thinking he would be released, but instead he's held because police realize this is Pee-wee Gaskin.
Yeah.
He's a wanted man.
Right.
He was charged with being a fugitive from the penitentiary and with helping Betty Jean's husband escape. Pee-wee was sentenced to 6 months in jail. Now, while he's locked up, his reputation as being a power man was in jeopardy. So he stole a knife from the kitchen and sliced a prisoner's ear off.
Ooh.
And after this incident, he regained his reputation, and the inmates realized he was not to be trifled with.
Yeah.
Although slicing off somebody's ear will get you 3 more months in jail.
It seemed like a small price to pay for what he had gone through before in prison.
I'm sure that's what he's thinking.
Yeah.
He did his time in Cooksville, Tennessee, and then he was extradited back to the state pen in Columbia, South Carolina. Remember, he escaped in those trash barrels.
Yeah.
He was placed in a 1-man cell with a maximum security guard. Pee-wee was charged by the FBI for interstate auto theft for when he stole the car in Lake City and crossed over into Tennessee. Pee-wee was transferred from the pen to Richland County Jail in Columbia, South Carolina. He was tried in federal court and sentenced to 3 more years in the federal prison, this time in Atlanta, Georgia.
Wow.
While in federal prison in Atlanta, he became friends with a man named Frank Costello, the godfather of the Genovese crime family in New York.
Yep, I know that name.
Pee-wee was given the name Little Hatchet Man.
Oh, man. So he got rid of the name Pee-wee.
No, he's still Pee-wee.
Okay.
I think Frank Costello called him Little Hatchet Man.
Okay, all right.
But Frank Costello took him under his wing. On August 6, 1961, when Pee-wee is released from prison, he moves in with his cousin, Marvin Perot, who was renting a trailer owned by his Uncle Dewey. Pee-wee could not find work, so he went back to working as a mechanic, repainting cars. But he wasn't just repainting cars, he was stealing cars, repainting them, and then selling them.
I knew there had to be an angle in there somewhere.
Got to be a catch, right?
Yeah.
He would also travel from town to town in said stolen cars and burglarize houses as he went. And since he's not staying in one place for very long, it's making it harder for the police to trace him. Now, if you're an ex-con who's out on parole and stealing to make ends meet, the last place you'd think he would go is to Jesus. But Pee-wee takes a job with the Reverend George E. Todd, helping out with his traveling ministry.
This just keeps getting better and better.
So if you're keeping track at home, we've had reform school, prison, the circus, prison, federal prison, and now we're traveling with the revival tent.
and I'm assuming we're not even halfway through this yet.
We're not even close.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Roll on.
While on the road with the traveling revival tent, Pee-wee continues stealing goods and breaking and entering. I mean, it's a pretty good cover.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been Pee-wee. He was putting up the tent for the revival.
Absolutely.
Pee-wee married for the third time, an 18-year-old named Jerry Dolores. Then he left the travel ministry and went back to just robbing and stealing goods full time, which still wasn't making enough money for him. But while all this is happening, Pee-wee starts having thoughts, something he calls, quote, them aggravated and bothersome feelings, end quote.
Uh-oh.
September 1962. There's a little girl named Patsy. She's 12 years old. She lives near Pee-wee's mother. So one Saturday, he decides them aggravated and bothersome feelings were too much, and he raped and molested her. Pee-wee was taken to the Florence County Jail, and she was taken home. Pee-wee was charged with statutory rape and carnal knowledge of a child. While at the Florence County Courthouse, the deputies had removed the handcuffs while he waited for his attorney, and Pee-wee escaped by jumping 30 feet out a window.
Wow.
Then he stole a county car with the keys in the ignition. He's on the run.
30 feet. He pulled a Ted Bundy.
He pulled a Ted Bundy before Ted Bundy pulled a Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
But Ted Bundy didn't have the balls to take one of the county's cars.
Yeah.
He went to his mother's house to get some money and then headed for Prospect, South Carolina, ditched the car in some water off the highway, made it on foot towards the town of Dillon, South Carolina, and once in Dillon, he stole a 1962 Ford Galaxy. The following day, he crossed state lines into North Carolina and the Lumbee Indian Reservation in Pembroke.
Okay.
He then stays in a boarding house. The next day, he drove his stolen car to Charlotte and left it there, caught a bus back to Raleigh, bought a 1949 Ford, and drove back to Pembroke.
Where'd he get the money?
Well, he's been stealing stuff and fencing goods. He's been stealing and then selling things. So he's got a wad of cash with him.
Yeah, okay.
Then Pee-wee married his fourth wife, a 17-year-old girl named Lenny Oxendine from Lumbee. And after 3 months of marriage, he grows tired of married life, and he informed her he was going to the store. But instead he left, and he just never came back.
Never returned. Wow. This guy's a piece of work.
He gets in touch with his wife, Jerry. By the way, he's marrying this woman and not really divorcing anybody.
Yeah.
And Jerry's upset about what had happened with the little 12-year-old girl, Patsy.
Oh, I'm sure.
And after sweet-talking her, after Pee-wee sweet-talks her, they agreed to go to Lake Wales, Florida, to look for his old buddy so he could try to get a job with the carnival once more. But when he gets there, he's told that his buddy had committed suicide at the funeral home after he discovered that his wife and 4 kids had died in a fire in their trailer.
Wow.
Now, Pee-wee was sad because his good buddy is dead.
Sure.
And he's affected by this terrible news, but it also affects his plans to work with the carnival and to steal parts from stolen cars, along with his old buddy, to make money.
Sure.
Jerry, his wife, informed him that she did not want to be with a man on the run and she was going back home. So now he's thinking, maybe I should go back to my wife, Lenny, in Pembroke, North Carolina, where I was safe.
Wow.
So while driving across the state line into Georgia, he hears sirens. Woo, woo, woo.
Bad boys, what you gonna do?
He tried to escape the police, but his left front tire blows out. The car goes flying into some water. Pee-wee escapes, leaving Jerry behind for the cops to deal with all of it.
Jeez.
See ya!
Man, what a guy. And they say chivalry is dead.
Chivalry's not dead in the South. See ya, Jerry. You deal with the cops.
Man.
After hiding out, he finds some train tracks, and by using the sun for navigation, he follows the tracks south to a small town north of Savannah, Dillon. He climbs aboard, falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he's in Savannah, Georgia. Now, there's another account where he stole a 1962 car and then crossed over into North Carolina, then drove the car the next day to Charlotte.
Okay.
So which one happens, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
He goes back to his wife, Lenny, who's not happy to see him. The TV and newspaper had his picture all over the place, saying that he was a killer who had drowned in the marsh near Savannah.
Oh, wow.
And his wife, Jerry, was released with no charges.
Okay.
So the woman he left behind, they were like, he's dead. We let her go.
And now she knows that he's married to her while she's still married. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep track here.
Well, it's good that you say this because the next morning, Lenny calls the deputy police department who wakes Pee-wee up from his slumber in the hotel room. They handcuffed him, and 2 days later, he's extradited back to the county jail in Florence. He's sentenced to 6 years for the statutory rape charge and an additional 2 years for his escape from the Florence County Courthouse and stealing an official car.
Wow. He just keeps racking them up.
He does.
Wow.
In 1964, Pee-wee's only 31 years old.
What a resume he's building.
Yes, it is. He's back in prison at the Central Correctional Institution in Columbia, where he regained his status as a power man.
Do we know how he regained that status?
Well, I think he just walked. He didn't kill anybody this time.
Okay.
But I think he's just he's back.
He's got a reputation now.
He's got a reputation. Sure. Pee-wee's back. He hasn't been gone that long.
Yep.
From this prison.
Yeah. Did you miss me?
I'm back. Yeah. But he's not just overpowering other prisoners for sex while he's there this time. He's sucking up to the warden. Warden Willis McDougald, who believed in rehabilitation and not punishment, actually likes Pee-wee.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe it's because he's a great con man. I don't know.
Sure.
But he writes a letter of recommendation to the parole board asking them to release Pee-wee because of his good behavior.
Man. And he's a good judge of character, obviously.
Which just makes me wonder, what was he doing for the warden in the back room?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's nothing about that. That's speculation on my part, but there it is. I said it.
Yeah, it sounds like something was going on.
It does, but we don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
But it's 1968, and just 4 years into his 8-year sentence, he is paroled in November after just doing those 4 years under one condition, that he would not step foot in Florence for 2 more years.
Wow.
Which is where he raped this girl.
Wow. I'd be outraged if I were the parents.
Well, of course you would be.
Yeah.
Pee-wee found a job doing roofing for a construction company in Sumter, but on the weekends and in the evenings, he was back to stealing and repainting stolen cars and just generally robbing homes. He would take time out of his busy schedule to go visit Mary, his first wife, and his daughter, who now had 2 children of her own.
Okay.
Now, mind you, he's not really allowed to be there, remember?
Right.
But he goes to see his mama and his ex-wife and his daughter and his grandchildren. Now, while doing a robbery with 2 teenage boys, the boys turned a knife on Pee-wee and took all of his money. After they robbed him, Pee-wee waited for these young boys at their home with his .32 Beretta automatic. At gunpoint, he ordered them into the trunk of his car, drove the boys to a swamp. He ordered them to hand over the money and jewelry and instructed them to take their clothes off and that he would let them live, but if they ever crossed him, they'd be dead.
Wow.
In the summer of 1968, he began to be troubled by this feeling, the bothersome feelings again, the bothersome pain.
Yep.
He said it began in his testicles, went up his spine through his stomach and in his head. This pain would settle behind his eyes, causing him to have a migraine. I have migraines all the time, Pee-wee. They don't start at my testicles.
I can attest to that.
But after it settles behind his eyes, the voice would come. And when both the voice and the pain were there together, he would have to leave because he didn't want to cause harm to his wife, Mary, or any other family member. And he decided the further away he was, the better.
Wow.
This is when Pee-wee started driving the coastal highway from Myrtle Beach to Savannah. And he's on the lookout for disposable people. Hitchhikers.
Okay.
He really likes the girls who said no to him because he likes to fantasize about how he would love to torture these girls that say no. But he didn't want to go back to prison, and that was really the only thing keeping him from raping and killing women.
Wow.
But by September 1969, he couldn't resist any longer. He picked up a blonde girl in Pawleys Island named Angie.
Okay.
He sodomized her, bit off her left nipple, and forced her to perform oral sex on him, stomped on her pubic bone, slid an 8-inch dagger into her rectum. He then pulled it until he sliced into her vagina. He takes her to the water, lets her go, and watches her sink. He takes her money, but tossed the rest of her stuff in the river. 6 weeks after his first murder, his head starts to hurt again. The bothersome pain that began in his testicles goes up his spine through his stomach and into his head again. And the voice comes again, and he's ready again.
Wow.
October 1969, Pee-wee meets Daisy from Jacksonville, who had been working in Myrtle Beach. He did to Daisy what he did to Angie, rape, sodomy, torture. He bound her and put heavy chains on her and drowned her in the swamp. Quote, all I could think about was how I could do anything I wanted to them, end quote.
Wow.
These next murders are his serious work, and about every 6 weeks, he's out looking for a new victim. By Christmas in 1969, he'd killed 3 people, and he wants to keep these people he's picking up alive for as long as he can. And some of them he would stab, some he would suffocate, sometimes he would mutilate them as well. So he's not a normal serial killer, as he does something different to each of them.
Yeah, I was going to say he doesn't have an MO at all.
November 10th, 1970, Pee-wee takes his niece, Janice Kirby, and her friend, Patty Ann Allsbrook, to his house to sober up his niece, as well as clean her up after she had vomited on herself. These 2 girls had been off partying. While he has the 2 girls in his house, he showed his penis to Patty Ann. Patty Ann, you poor thing.
Yeah.
When she tried to run away, because why would you stay and look at that?
Yeah.
She's not going to get too far, and when he gets to her, he orders her to sit down. His niece Janice is passed out, and Pee-wee decides he's going to sodomize his unconscious niece.
Yeah.
But she ended up waking up. She tries to fight him, and while he's busy with Janice, Patty Ann hits him over the head with a lamp.
Good for her.
The girls got away for a few moments, but he caught them running down the dirt path into the woods and ordered them into the trunk of his car. He would end up beating them to death and then pushed Patty's body into a septic tank, and he dug a grave for Janice behind an old barn.
Wow.
December 18th, 1970, a 13-year-old girl named Margaret Edwards Coutinho, she goes by Peggy, is missing. Her father is a well-known state senator, James Coutinho, and her grandfather was president of Clemson University.
Oh, wow.
Police question Pee-wee, thinking he's a possible suspect, but he has an alibi. 12 days later, her body is discovered in a wooded area right to the highway of 261, known as Manchester Forest. The autopsy suggested that she had died from strangulation and blows to the head. Burn marks from possible cigarettes covered her body. Her body decomposition suggested that she had only been killed within the last 5 days. Now, a man by the name of William Pierce, they called him Junior. He was 39 years old and a former truck driver from Swainsboro, Georgia. He actually confessed to Peggy's murder and was sentenced to life, even though none of the evidence pointed to him.
Really?
And according to Pee-wee, he was the one who tortured and murdered Peggy. But Junior served the time for her death.
I wonder why the truck driver confessed to it all.
I think he was coerced.
Okay.
And I think when Pee-wee came out later in life and said, yeah, that was my murder, they tried to get him off. And he didn't. He spent the rest of his life in prison.
Wow.
On December 31st, 1970, at 38 years old, Pee-wee's parole is completed, which meant he could return to Florence County. Like he hadn't ever been there before. He's gone back and back.
Yeah.
He remarried again for the 5th time on New Year's Eve. His new wife is 3 months pregnant.
Okay.
In June of 1971, wife number 5 gives birth to a son named Donald Lee Gaskins, and Pee-wee began to work at a used car lot, rebuilding cars that were clunkers for sale. Also in 1971, he went back to his old ways of stripping and repainting stolen cars, and the pain in his head and the strange voice came back, so he would head back out on the coastal highway looking for another innocent victim.
Wow.
And he liked his female victims, but between 1969 and 1975, he's going to pick up lots of people, lots of women and men. And he considered these kills on the coastal highway, quote, weekend recreation.
Wow.
Angie and Maria were Pee-wee's next victims that he took from the coastal highway. They were hitchhiking from Wilmington, North Carolina. They had dropped out of the 10th grade to go to work in Florida. He picked them up, raped them, tortured them both while they were alive, even going so far as to open their stomachs and pull out their intestines while they are still alive.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
In early 1972, Pee-wee befriends a woman who was 20 years old, Martha Ann Dix.
Okay.
She was also known as Clyde. Clyde was a lesbian and a transvestite. She has drug addiction problems, and she also has an extensive criminal record.
Okay.
March 29, 1972, Clyde goes too far with Pee-wee by joking that she was pregnant with his child and that the baby would be named Pee-wee Dix.
Okay. Well, you know what? I can't even top that. I'm just going to leave that alone.
Now, what I haven't told you is that Pee-wee is not only a murderous asshole who likes to torture and rape his victims, he's also racist. And Clyde is African American.
Gotcha.
Pee-wee did not believe in interracial relationships. Well, Pee-wee, why are you sleeping with Clyde?
Yeah, exactly.
Pee-wee informed her to meet him after 6. He had some pills and $5 for oral sex. She agreed to meet Pee-wee at this abandoned house. When Clyde arrives, Pee-wee gave her the pills, handcuffed her, punched her in the jaw, and she tried to get away. He forced her to finish the bottle of pills. He dumped her dead body into a drainage ditch.
Wow.
In June of 1972, his next victim was Ann Culberson. She was from Atlanta. He tortured her for 96 hours at this old abandoned house. On day 4, he smashed her head in from behind with a ball-peen hammer, dug a grave behind the bar where his niece Janice Kirby was buried and her best friend is in the septic tank. He actually cut through Janice's body as he's digging before pushing Ann into the grave. In 1973, Pee-wee buys an old hearse.
Well, that's apropos.
He paints it purple and tells people that he needed the hearse to haul all the people he killed to his private cemetery.
He's telling people this?
He's telling people this. Like it's a joke.
Wow.
But it's the truth.
Wow.
He's telling this to all the people at his favorite bar in Prospect, South Carolina.
Wow.
October 1973, Pee-wee's now 40 years old. He picks up 19-year-old Jackie Freeman. He rapes and tortures her for days. Then he kills her and eats part of her calf muscle.
Oh, man.
2 months later, in December of 1973, Pee-wee is hearing the voices again. Living nearby is an unwed mother. She has a little girl named Robin, who's 2 years old. And the unwed mother is also 8 months pregnant. Her name is Doreen Dempsey.
Okay.
Doreen knows Pee-wee as her normal neighbor who drives a purple hearse. And she's looking for a ride to the bus station for her and her daughter. She's going home to Atlanta to be with her mother where she can have the second baby.
Okay.
Pee-wee tells her that he will take them to the bus station, but he was having, quote, them aggravated and bothersome feelings, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of taking her to the bus station, he took her and her daughter to a wooded area, raped and killed her while the little Robin watched, the little girl, and then raped the 2-year-old girl.
Oh, man.
He then buried the two of them along with Doreen's unborn child.
Mm-hmm.
It gets worse because later this piece of shit is going to say that sex with this 2-year-old girl was the best sex of his life. July 1974, Pee-wee picks up 2 boys. He rapes them and castrates them before murdering them.
My God.
They are considered 2 John Does.
Wow.
Also in July of 1974, he murders his friend and criminal associate, 36-year-old Johnny Sellers, and 22-year-old Jessie Ruth Judy. He shot Johnny in the back of the head and stabbed to death Johnny's ex-girlfriend, Jessie, after Pee-wee confronted them over money they owed him from the sale of a stolen boat. Johnny and Pee-wee had robbed a house together and stolen a boat together. Pee-wee sold everything they took with the promise of handing over half the money, and instead, Pee-wee lured Johnny out to Alligator Landing, where he shot him and stabbed her. I also read that he tied their bodies with heavy chains and watched them as they struggled for air while drowning at Alligator Landing.
Wow.
In August of 1974, he murders a man named Horace Jones. I don't know anything else about Horace. January 1975, at the age of 42, Pee-wee separates from his 5th wife and his son goes to live with his daughter. This is when his friend Walter Neely moves in with Pee-wee. Walter, it was a bad move.
Yeah, not your best decision, Walter.
Yeah. In 1975, Pee-wee is driving along the coastal highway when he sees a van on the side of the road. They're obviously broken down. He stops to offer help to the 20-year-old guy and the 2 college girls stranded there. He forces the 3 of them to have group sex with him in the van before he savagely killed them with a knife after castrating the 20-year-old male.
Good Lord.
But he needs help to get rid of the bodies. So he calls his new roommate, Walter Neely. He needs help to get rid of not 1, but 3. So Walt drives the van from the side of the road to Pee-wee's garage and helps Pee-wee get rid of these bodies in Pee-wee's graveyard.
Wow.
Behind this old abandoned house.
Yeah.
Then Pee-wee fixes up the van and he sells it. Now, it's interesting to me that people didn't ever catch on to the idea that Pee-wee was a serial rapist and killer. But what some did know about him was that he was a killer for hire. And in February of 1975, a woman named Suzanne Kipper Owens hired Pee-wee to kill her boyfriend, Silas Barnwell Yates.
Wow.
The agreed upon price was $1,500. Silas was a wealthy farmer from Florence County, and Suzanne was a disgruntled ex-girlfriend who Silas had mistreated. Now, from at least one source, it said that Suzanne was Walter Gaskins' ex-wife. Now, Pee-wee didn't handle any of the back and forth between himself and Suzanne. There were 2 men who did this, John Powell and John Owens. The Johns arranged this murder.
Okay.
And here's the plan. On February 12th, 1975, Diane would say she had car problems and get Silas out of his house. After he left the home, Pee-wee kidnapped him and murdered him as the 2 Johns watched. The 2 Johns dug the graves And then the three of them buried Silas's body in Pee-wee's graveyard. I've also read in a source that after this, Pee-wee began a sexual relationship with Suzanne, the woman who hired him to kill.
Wow.
Diane Neely, the woman who lured him out, told her boyfriend and ex-con Avery Howard about how she paid for Silas to be murdered. And Avery Howard goes to Pee-wee and says, "Look it, I know what you did, and if you don't give me $5,000, I'm going to snitch."
Uh-oh.
So Pee-wee's like, "Sure, dude, I'll pay you to keep your mouth shut. You and Diane meet me and we can exchange the money."
Good Lord. How stupid do you have to be that you're going to go threaten to blackmail a hitman?
Yeah, right. So they do, and Pee-wee promptly murders 29-year-old Diane Neely and her boyfriend Avery Howard. Pee-wee will initially claim he didn't murder them. He said he left an armed but unnamed friend alone with the couple. This friend repeatedly stabbed them before Pee-wee returned to the room, where he then promptly shot them both in the head for, quote, "good measure," end quote.
Wow.
Later, he's going to claim that he shot and stabbed Diane and stabbed Avery before burying them both in Prospect in his graveyard. He puts those bodies in the graveyard, but on top of all of this, Pee-wee is now thinking, I got to get rid of the two Johns.
Yeah.
So he's killing people for money, and then to cover up his hits, he's killing those people.
Wow.
And he's still hearing the voices that are telling him to rape, torture, and murder. And when he hears them again in 1975, he murders a girl that he knew, 13-year-old Kim Gaskins. She's a neighbor of Pee-wee's. He lured her to his house and then brutally raped and murdered her, placing her body in his private graveyard once again.
Jeez.
I also read that when this murder happened between April and October of 1975, Kim Gaskins was repeatedly raped by him and a group of his friends before her death.
Wow.
And in this source, Pee-wee had actually groomed her and her family to the point that Kim's family allowed her to go on vacation with Pee-wee and his wife to a family cabin.
Wow.
When it was time for Kim to go home, Pee-wee walked her to a bus stop alone, and while they're standing on this deserted road, Pee-wee stabbed her to death before burying her near Silas.
Jeez.
It's at this point Pee-wee moves to Charleston, South Carolina. But while he's there, two local boys, Johnny Knight and Dennis Bellamy, rob Pee-wee's car repair shop. Now, these two are brothers, and they just so happen to be the brothers of Diane Neely, who was just murdered.
Yeah.
And when Pee-wee figures out who robbed him, he shoots them both and buries them in his graveyard. Now, one theory as to why Pee-wee decided to kill the brothers after their sister was murdered was that Dennis would spend much of his time getting drunk, and while intoxicated, he would cause trouble outside of Pee-wee's house. And the worst was when Dennis started a fight outside the house, when Pee-wee decided that killing him was the only solution to this easily resolvable problem.
Of course, nothing a bullet couldn't take care of.
It's true.
Yeah.
Now, some say Pee-wee and Dennis stole some cars while Pee-wee hid from suspicions in Kim's case when the police are out looking for this young girl who's now missing.
Right.
They sold the car parts, split the money, and in this theory, John only died because he went with Dennis to Pee-wee's house to collect the money.
Gotcha.
There are all kinds of different sources and theories, and Pee-wee's a big fat liar, so it's hard to know what is true and what isn't true.
Right.
Now, regardless of which theory you believe, Pee-wee still lured Dennis Bellamy and John Henry Knight separately to a spot close to his house. He shot them both in the back of their heads before he buried them.
All right.
Meanwhile, the Sumter, South Carolina police are looking for 13-year-old Kim Gaskins. And they look close to home and investigate Kim's neighbor, an all-around sketchy ex-con, Pee-wee Gaskins.
Sure.
And what they find when they search his home is not Kim, but her underwear and her clothes.
Oops.
So they arrest Pee-wee and his roommate, Walter Neely, on November 14th, 1975. Pee-wee is indicted for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and they don't grant him bail, and he's sitting in prison awaiting trial. Now, while this happens, and they've also taken in Walter wants a deal.
and Walter sang like a canary.
He's going to sing like a canary. Walter wants a deal. He sees the writing on the wall. He knows he's going to go down with Pee-wee if he doesn't say something.
Sure.
So he rolls on Pee-wee.
Like a big old piece of carpet.
And he tells the police, look it, I didn't murder any of these people, but I know where the bodies are buried. 8 of them.
Wow.
And I will tell you if you make me a deal. And the police say,
bring it on.
No dice.
Really?
No way, Jose.
They turned it down.
Turned it down.
Wow.
Turned it down.
I wonder why.
Well, now they know that there's a graveyard and that Pee-wee did it. I mean, Walter's not, what is it you always say? He's not a Mensa candidate.
Not a Mensa candidate.
Yeah.
Right?
When they question Pee-wee, he confesses and then shows police where he buried 8 of his victims because he also wants a deal. He takes them to his graveyard where they uncover the graves of Sellers, Judy, Howard, Diane Neely, Johnny Knight, Dennis Bellamy, Doreen Dempsey, and her 2-year-old daughter Robin, as well as her unborn child.
Wow.
On April 27th, 1976, the coroner's report is issued and it verifies everything Walter had told them. Walter and Pee-wee were both charged with 8 murders, and the trial began a month later on May 24th, 1976.
Okay.
Pee-wee takes the stand and confesses to every murder he's accused of, along with 2 others.
Really?
Describing in detail how he had murdered them all.
Was he proud of this?
He's very proud of it. It took the Florence County jury only 47 minutes.
I was going to say 47 seconds.
47 minutes to find Pee-wee guilty for the murder of one of the 8 victims, Dennis Bellamy. He was sentenced to death by the electric chair.
Oh, wow.
But that sentence was overturned by the South Carolina Supreme Court in February of 1978. And rather than face a new trial, Pee-wee pled guilty to the murders of John Henry Knight, Dennis Bellamy, Diane Bellamy Neely, Avery Howard, Jesse Ruth, Johnny Sellers, and Doreen Dempsey. He was given 10 concurrent life sentences to be served at the Central Correctional Institution prison in Columbia, South Carolina. Welcome home, Pee-wee.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, you'd think that Pee-wee would rot in his prison cell at this point.
Right.
But that is not the end of this story.
Really?
In March of 1978, a man named Rudolph Tyler, a 24-year-old junkie from New York City, robbed a mom-and-pop grocery store in Murrells Inlet, South Carolina.
Okay.
He took $200 and murdered the owners, Myrtle and Bill Moon. When Tyler is caught, he's sentenced to the electric chair, but with all the backlog of executions, he's sitting on death row for years. Something that didn't sit well with Myrtle and Bill's son, Tony.
I'm sure.
Tony does his due diligence and discovers Pee-wee Gaskins was in prison with Rudolph Tyler, and that Pee-wee is actually what's called a trustee, meaning he's an inmate worker who's been shown to have good behavior while he's incarcerated, and he's got a job like cooking or maintenance. He has a little more free reign.
Sure.
Now, how Pee-wee Gaskins got on this list is beyond me.
Yeah.
But he is.
Well, he's a con man.
He's so much more than a con man, but you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So Tony, the son of Myrtle and Bill Moon, contacts Pee-wee and makes a contract. If Pee-wee can kill Rudolph, Tony will pay him through his prison commissary account $2,000.
Wow.
So Pee-wee says,
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay.
I'm in.
First, Pee-wee tried to poison him, but it didn't work, and it only made Rudolph sick. Not to be deterred, somehow Pee-wee gets his hands on C4 inside the prison.
Good Lord.
How, you might ask?
Yeah. Gee whiz.
Well, he asks Tony to send him a shoe with the C4 implanted inside the shoe's heel.
Gotcha.
And he now has C4 and a blasting cap in his possession inside the prison.
In prison. Wow. Okay.
Now remember, Pee-wee, from a very young age, can tinker and fix just about anything.
Sure.
From the time he's a kid. He rigs up a radio for Rudolph.
Wow.
He gives it to him and says, this is a two-way radio, and we can talk to each other. All you have to do is at night when everybody's asleep, hold the radio up to your ear and plug in the cord.
Oh, wow.
And you'll be able to hear me.
Jeez.
And Rudolph Tyler did just that. And when he did, it blew Rudolph to bits.
Wow.
There's a report that it took weeks to clean Rudolph Tyler's prison cell.
I'm sure. Yeah. A little C4 will go a long way.
And he was holding it to his head.
Yeah. Oh, mercy.
The son, Tony, ended up getting 8 years in the pokey for his role in this murder.
Wow.
Yes. And when it's discovered that Pee-wee gave him the radio and then it was Pee-wee who rigged the C4 and blew up Randolph, he is sentenced this time to death by the electric chair.
Wow.
And it's at this point he began confessing to other murders to try to avoid it. And if these confessions are true, he would be the worst killer in South Carolina's history.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Between 80 and 100 and something.
Gee whiz.
Yes. While he awaits execution, he was put into the hole. Again, this is very Shawshank.
Yeah.
It's the dungeon of the prison with no contact where the guard beat him weekly.
Right.
Just before his execution date, he somehow got a hold of a razor blade. He swallowed it and later regurgitated it back up again. Shades of Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs.
How do you do that?
I have absolutely no idea.
Without slicing your innards up.
On September 5th, 1991, one day before his execution, Pee-wee tries to commit suicide by slashing his wrists and the crux of his arms, like the soft inside fleshy part where you can bend your arm, with this razor. But a guard caught him, and they took him to the infirmary, and they sewed his ass back up again. It took 20 stitches to save his life so they could put his ass in the electric chair the next day.
Poetic justice.
And they did just that.
Wow.
At 1:10 a.m. on September 6, 1991, Donald Henry Gaskins died. The only member of his family present was his son, Donald.
Wow.
Now, the last 2 years of his life, Pee-wee spent time writing his autobiography. It was published 2 years after his death and is titled Final Truth. I referred to it in the sources at the beginning.
Right.
In this book, Pee-wee claims to have killed as many as 110 men and women and children.
Jeez.
And even though these claims have never been verified, there are tons of officials in coastal Carolina who think 110 is too small of a number.
Wow.
But that is the crazy story of Pee-wee Gaskins. And that's all I have to say about that. She is only one, but what if one is all that's needed? Hospice nurse Indy Luce has fallen in love. After caring for billionaire Louis Thornberry until his final breath, she's now engaged to marry the heir apparent of the global tech empire, David Thornberry. But as the divinely marked Indy packs up her old life to begin anew, a sacred promise comes back to haunt her with a vengeance. As an unrelenting spiritual battle unfolds in the shadows, the descendants of those like Indy find themselves persistently lured and ensnared as a relentless surge of evil becomes an unstoppable force. With malevolent entities following her every step, what Indy doesn't know about her family's sacred covenant could tip the scales of good and evil. The follow-up to the paranormal suspense novel Lead Me From Temptation and Book 2 of the Divine Darkness series, Deliver Me From Evil, is now available March 29th, 2024, wherever you buy or download books, or go to chriscalvert.com. If evil prowls seeking someone to devour,
can one woman seek and save that which is lost.
There is a special place in hell for people like this guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the thing that infuriates me even more, I'm being facetious here, is the fact that he had the name Pee-wee, because he's messing with one of my favorite TV heroes, Pee-wee Herman.
A Pee-wee Herman.
I know.
He was far from Pee-wee Herman.
I know. But yeah, like I said, though, there's a special place in hell for someone like this.
Yeah, little guy, mistreated. Yeah, had to do a lot. I think, who knows what would have happened to him if he still would have been this horrible person if he hadn't been tortured as a kid.
Yeah.
But, you know, I kept thinking about the hole, how they would put him in solitary confinement and beat him.
Yeah.
Well, that's nothing compared to the hell he's living in now.
There you go. No air conditioning.
No air conditioning where he is right now.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on and do a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, this first one I'm going to call child's play.
Okay.
Police are on the lookout for a brazen thief who broke into a YMCA through a ceiling to steal cash from a register.
I didn't know the YMCA had that much money on hand.
Well, here it is. The trouble is, neither the cash nor the register are real. Security footage captured the man kicking through the ductwork in the ceiling of the YMCA Child Development Center in Indio, California.
Oh, my gosh.
He then drops to the floor to break into a cash register, stealing all the money inside before making a daring escape out the door. There's just one problem. The cash register in question is a child's toy filled with play money that is worth next to nothing.
It's Barbie money.
It is. The Indio Police Department believes this might not be the first acoustic ceiling tile-crushing caper this cat burglar has sunk his claws into. Thieves tend to have specific MOs with stuff that they follow and stuff that they are comfortable with, he said. They don't get caught doing it once, and they figure, hey, it's a tried and true method, and then they stick to it, explains IPD Sergeant Dan Marshall.
I'm good at climbing through ceilings.
That's it. So he took the cash,
the fake cash.
Yeah. But they busted him, and,
That's still called breaking and entering.
It is. Bye-bye. All right, number 2, a clear case of stupidity.
I didn't know any case of stupidity was clear.
Well, this is even more clear.
A murky case of stupidity.
Yeah. Philadelphia police are looking for an armed robbery suspect who tried and failed to disguise himself. Surveillance cameras captured the suspect pacing around the outside of a Dunkin' Donuts on the 300 block of Oregon Avenue.
Okay.
After a few minutes, the man decided to strike. He placed, here we go, a transparent bag over his head and made a beeline for the counter. After hopping over it, the robber pulled out a knife and grabbed a box containing cash.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The suspect then lost the plastic disguise while trying to escape. Now, if you have any info about the man behind the clear cover-up, you can call the South Detective Division at 215-686-3013, extension 3014.
He got away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bless his heart.
I know. Duh. All right. Number 3. And finally, I wonder if he gave him 5 stars.
Okay.
Rochelle Park, New Jersey. A burglary suspect's plan didn't go as intended when he ended up getting into the back of a police car instead of his lift while trying to escape.
Oh my gosh, that's gold.
You can't make that up.
That is great.
Police were alerted to a burglary just after 10 p.m. at a home on Catherine Street.
Okay.
When the residents discovered the suspect on the second floor of their home, he tried to get away through the window and jumped from the roof.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. The suspect, later identified as 28-year-old Nicholas Maziot, called a lift in an attempt to escape the area, but apparently mistook a responding police car as his getaway vehicle instead.
Rats.
Yep, Maziot was taken into custody and later confessed to the detectives. He has been charged with burglary, attempted theft, possession of burglary tools, criminal mischief, trespassing, and hindering apprehension.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's gone.
Can you imagine me, the police officers? He just hops in the back of your cruiser. You're like,
Thanks.
well.
Yeah, thanks for the gumball, Mickey.
Yeah, it was fortuitous.
Yeah. It was probably the guy's first day on duty.
Yeah.
And he went, well, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to
This
be.
seems like a pretty easy job.
This is great.
The door shuts and he just takes off with the sirens.
Yeah. We're done. So there's your dumb criminals.
Bless his heart.
Yeah,
God love him. Bless his heart.
Yeah.
And then his Lyft driver showed up and was like,
He's going,
what's happening?
yeah, man, now I lost the fare.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com.
Yep.
There's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case, just like this one was suggested. We're going to do lots of those in Season 5.
Yep.
You can also tell us about your brush with true crime. We're going to do one of those next week.
Oh, nice.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.